Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to IPDay's Webinar Wednesday. Today's webinar is From Practice to Diploma, Building an Effective GED Voucher and Testing Framework. Okay. My name is Megan Duke, and I am an IPDay subject matter expert, an employee of Indian River State College. So just a little housekeeping, some things to keep in mind today. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A option, not in the chat, but in the Q&A to make sure that we see each of your questions and don't look over them in the chat. All attendees are in listen-only mode today. Today's webinar is being recorded, so the audio recording, the PowerPoint, and then a handout with some of the content will be available in 48 hours on IPDay's website. So please keep an eye out for that. So here is an agenda for today's webinar, just an overview. So welcome and introductions, the origin and story of the system development. So this GED voucher system, our step-by-step voucher process at Indian River State College, the 4 key stakeholders and their roles, and how it makes this system really be effective and successful for students, data and results, and actual student outcomes, individual, key takeaways, and then a few recognitions. So project and origin and system development, there we recognized that there was quite a need for a system, a collaborative multi-system approach. So our retention and recruitment specialist was actually Brenda Diaz before she transitioned over to IPDay. She came to the administration of our program and she went to our data and testing coordinator and was like, listen, there really needs to be a system because we wanted real-time student data, voucher data. When we say voucher data, we're referring to GED practice exams across all of our 6 campuses for our in-person and our online students. Students were getting lost in the shuffle of our staffing or from summer to summer, or if they would move from campus to campus. So the idea is let's come up with a system that all staff, full-time or part-time, are using, that we put students' information in so we can help better track them, which is going to provide for a quicker outcome to get their credential, their GED diploma. So the first thing that they did is come up with a visual process, a map, which we're going to look at here in a few minutes. And it showed every step from when the student registered to when they reached their diploma. It was a clear workflow for all staff. Then there was also a detailed manual created. A lot of people are visual, so it gave step-by-step visual instructions, how to work students into getting them registered into our voucher system, how to issue them the vouchers, and how to follow up with progress and communicate and cheer the student on along the way. So we also created a quick reference job aid. There was a more detailed, as we looked at the instruction manual, go back a slide. As we looked at the instruction manual, this was a very detailed version, but there was also a quick job aid for our full-time and part-time staff to look at. This quick guide reference sheet was developed to help staff follow the process step by step without fully having to consult that manual after their initial training. But of course, the manual was there if needed. It outlined each step and the expected outcome, including links to Microsoft Forms for the practice and final test, which in a moment, we're going to be looking at each of these things in greater detail. Just wanted to show you one more slide. We also had a training video that the full-time and part-time staff could watch to ensure that there was consistent implementation, but also for them to watch along with their written manual to kind of give that wraparound support, because it is a very detailed process, which I'm about to show you. We also had 3 interconnected Excel spreadsheets. So hold on, I know this seems like there's a lot going on, which there was a lot of moving parts, but we're going to give you visuals and follow up in just a moment. But there was MS forms. We would, enter the system enter the students into the system using an MS form. Then once we had the responses and they were in an Excel spreadsheet, we would follow up with that, requesting practice vouchers and final exam vouchers. So let's talk about, let me show you my some of my documents here to help this make a little bit more sense. So here is the flow chart. Okay, so students would start and they would register. Students come to us, I need to get my GED. We would, do the necessary paperwork that's required by our institution. And we would also immediately ensure that they had a GED.com account. That is a pivotal part of this process for multiple reasons. The GED.com account is going to allow us to follow up with them when they start taking GED practice test and GED final exams. Okay, and we'll look at that in more detail. But also, when we report that data to the state, this is where our data people are pulling those reports to prove, hey, the student passed their math subject area exam with us, or their reading subject area exam with us, or they completed their diploma and they did it on this date. Okay, so you can kind of follow along here. And again, this will be available on the handout and IPDA's website in about 48 hours. So again, we registered them. They would take the intake test, whether it be the CASA Schools 2, TABE, or whatever else you're using for intake. And they would have to get a level 3 or higher. The reason why we had this qualification of a level 3 or higher is because when you look in the technical assistant paperwork set forth by the FLDOE, that was the requirement to be able to use funding from the grant to allow students to take a GED ready test. The next step is that students also had to complete 12 hours of coursework. Why 12 hours of coursework? Because again, in the technical assistant paperwork, that is kind of, that was one of the requirements by the state. So we have this flow chart, get a level 3, get 12 hours of class. They would be given a GED ready voucher. And we're going to talk more on how we followed up with them after they were taking their practice exams. Okay, so here's our instruction manual. And again, that will be part of the handouts, how we're entering students into the system for the first time. So as I said, they're going to register. We're going to put them in our school system, but also we want to register them in this voucher system. So it was a quick and easy MS form. Our staff would pull up the MS link. They would put the students' information in, their name, their campus, their class schedule potentially, but also their GED.com information. And then we would have that information when they started taking practice tests. We had sections to also put their testing scores. Another thing that we also, this is that student registration form. So student ID, student name, whether they were dual enrollment. We do have a model where our students can co-enroll in GED and upper level ESOL classes. Do they have that GED.com account? Again, that GED.com account was crucial so that we can follow the students as an instructor and as staff in the office, but also so we can capture that data when it's time to do data reporting. Also, if they were doing online or in person, or if it was more hybrid. The model that we have chosen most recently is only to allow students to do hybrid, which means they can go in person and online simultaneously, so that way they can get enough hours in order to post test. Because we found if we didn't let students that have only one subject left to do a hybrid option, that they were getting instruction, but not enough instruction to help them get the close those academic gaps to pass the final, but also to post-test, which we know is that 70% post-testing rate is crucial. We also put the term and, like I said earlier, the campus. So then it would populate on an Excel spreadsheet, and we would share that Excel spreadsheet with our staff as well with these answers. I wasn't going to show you that today because of FERPA reasons and student privacy, but after that, we had those answers there, and we had a column for math practice, reading practice, science practice, social studies practice, and we had their scores there. And then we would have, when they started taking final exams, all on that same spreadsheet, and it was by campus, and everybody at that campus could access that data. So like I said, when we were having difficulty crossing from morning to evening or online student to in-person student, everybody could see everything in real time, and everybody was responsible for helping update that with practice scores. And we're going to talk about where we located those in just a few minutes. So I'm going to move back over to my PowerPoint. And also, too, if you have any thoughts, questions, or concerns as you're listening out there today, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A section. Jacqueline, can you give me a little bit more information on your question? Is this a publisher document? If you're talking about like a certain software, all of this is just through Outlook's Excel and Outlook's MS Forms. Yeah, the questionnaire is through MS Forms, Microsoft Forms. Thank you for that. So, oh, of course, you're most welcome. And, that took a little bit of, trial and error getting that just right, but we tested it too and made sure when we created the form that it flowed smoothly, but also before we had it go live where staff were actually putting student data in, we did a few testing students and saw how after it left the MS form, how we could locate the responses to those MS forms, and then also from there how that would transpose onto an Excel document as well, and for that information to stay live, that every time somebody was added to it, the responses. So definitely encourage you to kind of test that system out before you go live with it. Okay, so as we said, student registration, we're using this MS form and we're collecting that. And when we say student data file, it's their name, their age. If they're a minor, of course, that's always important, that we monitor that information slightly differently, and make sure that they are able to take those GED exams, final exams. We know minors have to have a little bit more approval. And then again, the NRS score of a level 3 or higher in 12 hours in class. Again, because that is the state guideline on the technical assistant paperwork. I also know that the new technical assistant paperwork for 26-27 is out. So I highly encourage you to look over that as well. So then after that, we would start going into the classroom. We were really tried to be diligent, have our team be diligent on watching attendance, seeing when people had the 12 hours. And then when they had the 12 hours of class, we were going into, as career pathways facilitators, part-time intake specialists, testing coordinators, going out into the classrooms and having students take these GED ready tests. And we found that with the GED ready test, a lot of students were very hesitant. Our GED students are a special population. And a lot of their barriers are self-esteem and self-confidence. So we'd be like, let's go now. Let's take the practice test while you're here in class. And at first, most of them would, and there was still a little pushback, but we always prefaced it as a win-win. If you do well on it, we're going to send you to take the final. Awesome. If it's not the score that you were looking for, that is okay. We're going to use that data to drive instruction, which leads me into point number 3 and point number 4. So when the students take a ready test, and I'm going to show you an example in just a moment, when they take the ready test on GED.com in any subject, they are going to get color-coded results. Okay, a green means that they are ready to take the final. The yellow means they're kind of in the middle there. They could potentially pass, but there is the chance that if they got a couple rough questions that they weren't skilled in, they wouldn't. And then red means they are not quite ready to test. So what we did is we had the students take those ready tests. Then we provided a score report to the student and the instructor. And we're going to look at that in just a moment as well. So these are prescriptive study plans, because what happens is GED has several curriculums, online curriculum platforms and textbook platforms or textbooks, series, and it literally will tell the student and the instructor what topics and what pages or what lessons in that electronic curriculum that the students should study in order to close those academic gaps. Okay. And then from there, if the student scored a one, this next part was an internal policy. A 145 on a GED exam or practice exam is considered passing. But we also know that the practice exams are shorter versions of the real test. Testing anxiety, especially when you get in those proctored scenarios, can cause stress and worry to the student. And we don't, it's all these different questions. It's a mixed test bank. So we wanted there to be a 5-point buffer so that we were spending the money wisely. We get GED ready exam vouchers with grant funding, but our final exam vouchers are all paid for by private donations and fundraising. So we wanted to be very mindful with our grant funding and with our final voucher donor funding. So we have this 150 or higher. So if a student takes a practice test and they score a 150 or higher, then we are going to refer them and help them schedule the final exam. And right now we currently have funding to pay for each student's final exams in our program through generous donations throughout our community. So the next thing is the GED diploma. We're tracking and reporting in the GED management and the GED manager accounts, which I will show you in a couple of moments. So, oops, sorry about that. Okay, so just kind of rolling back here, and I got excited, so I got a little bit ahead of my slides here. But that MS form, once we put it into an MS form, it is going to auto-populate in the responses and can be exported into an Excel document where we're adding those other bits of information like the voucher number issued. So on this Excel spreadsheet with all of the student data, as I said, we're adding extra columns, and in those columns, we're putting the number of the voucher that we're issuing, the voucher ID number. Then we're also, as the student takes the test, we're going to help them enter that voucher code into, that's another reason why we love for students to take the ready test in person with us on campus. And we even invite our online students to come in when a time that's convenient for them to take it on campus, because then we can have the students enter, if they're eligible, we can help them enter the practice code. And then if they're eligible for a final exam, we can help them enter that access or voucher code as well. We do have step-by-step processes, if not like a little spreadsheet or not spreadsheet, a little step-by-step instruction as well. So staff enter the scores from GED.com into that Excel tracking system. And then they, as I said, they're going to download and share that score report with the student, but also the instructor as well, because the instructor is going to give pinpointed instruction in whole group or in small group during instructional hours. And then again, as I said, if they get 150 or higher, we're going to help them enter that final exam voucher into GED.com and help them schedule their final exam. Okay. So as you can see, there are a lot of key stakeholders in our voucher system. There are 4 key stakeholders in this voucher system, and every step involves these 4 people working in coordination with one another in order to make it work. So the first thing is our staff. Our staff are constantly reviewing students' intake scores. They're looking at that Excel spreadsheet and saying, okay, who's eligible? Let's go into the classroom. Okay, when did they take the test? What did they score on the test? Did someone print the report, or are they ready to go? Did someone, request the final exam voucher? So in saying that, our voucher system we have a reservoir of all of the voucher codes that we have purchased through GED.com. And that system is also automated through in the back end through Excel and connecting them. So what happens is that when a student is eligible, because they have a 3 or higher, and because they have 12 hours in class, our staff is going to go to a separate MS form, and they're going to request that voucher for that student, and they will receive an email. And that's something that our tech guys in our program did for us. Our data coordinator helped create that process for us, so that we receive an email with the voucher code, and we can even request the steps to enter the voucher for the students. Then after that happens, and they take the practice test. As I said, we're going to enter the scores into that same Excel tracking list. And then also we can ask for final exams, and there's an option to approve or reject those final exams. Maybe on accident someone requested an exam for a student that wasn't eligible yet, or they put in the wrong student's name. We have that as well. I see someone has a question. Yes. So Nancy asked in the Q&A, you provide vouchers for students that are in levels 3 or higher. Yes. Based on the technical assistance paperwork, we can provide GED practice exams, the ready exams, to students who have a level 3 or higher. So with math, they have a level 3 or higher in math on the intake test, whether you use TABE, CASA Schools 2, or whatever else is out there acceptable. Then they must also have 12 hours of coursework. We have to wait to 12 hours because that's when the technical assistant paperwork deems that a student is enrolled in the course. Okay. Nancy, if you have any follow-up questions with that, because I know also too with RLA, if a student gets a 3 on the RLA intake, they are eligible for an RLA, a science, and a social studies final or ready voucher. Okay. Thank you for that question, Nancy. All right. So the next stakeholder is, of course, our student, right? Without our students, we wouldn't have this process. So we're making sure when they come in to register that they are creating that GED.com account. And we have to make sure that they have shared scores with the institution. So we can't just be like, oh, yes, I have a GED.com account. Okay, great. They need to make sure that they've shared their scores with your school, because that's how you as an administrator or the people that run your GED manager accounts are going to be able to see this practice and final exam data in these score reports. Of course, they have to attend classes regularly. We're looking for students that get 12 hours, but we're also looking at spending voucher money on students that are committed. They're showing up, and they're not just showing up, but they're putting in the work. You know, they're taking notes, they're asking questions, they're, being diligent in the classroom. So then they're going to use the voucher to take the GED ready test, preferably in person on campus. We're going to then review the scores with the student and the instructor. Then the student is going to study They're going to prepare. They're going to put in the work to continue. So even though maybe they're looking for a 150 so that we will provide a final exam for them, we highly encourage the student, hey, you got a 150, a 152. That is fantastic. Let's continue to study between now and next week, or now and 2 weeks from now, so that we can make sure that we cover some things that maybe you weren't doing so well on, to really ensure you're going to get that great score. And then, of course, as I said, we're studying until they schedule and take the GED final exam. And then the process starts over. We move on to the next subject. Somebody else asked, how big is our program? We serve on 6, now 7 campuses, and we have approximately 400 students, give or take, on any semester. Okay. Right. Of course, the next stakeholder that I have alluded to is our instructors. So our instructors are those who track the attendance and make sure that in the students' readiness. Not only do they have 12 hours of classwork, but they're being diligent during classroom time, working, using their study plans. The instructor's also going to review students' intake scores. Okay, this is a level 1 student. This is a level 2. Okay, this is a level 3 or higher. So I'm going to be watching them to take these practice tests. And even if it's a level 1 and 2 student who's not quite eligible for a voucher, they're going to be monitoring them in other ways and working with them in other ways. That way, when they post test, they are ready to take some practice tests with a level 3 and working on helping them move up their NRS score to that level 3. Again, as I already said, we also provide students score reports to the instructor so that the instructor can figure out, okay, hey, are a couple students struggling with this topic as I'm reviewing score reports? Maybe I should teach this lesson whole group, or during breakout sessions, I can work with these 3 students on one topic and then switch over and work with these 3 students on another topic. So the instructor can plan out the next couple of weeks of classes based on these score reports, because oftentimes we have them test in batches, especially at the beginning of the semester. Okay, if all students have been present the past couple of classes, they're all going to have 12 hours. So let's pull and practice test all of them on the same date and time, provide those score reports so everybody can move forward together, including the instructor who's making, decisions based on that data. Okay, we also have we're recently implemented and bought a product called CASAS Connects through Aztec Software, which does this same thing, but with intake scores. So with intake scores, it automatically populates overnight, and TOPS Pro, CASAS Goals 2, connects with this software, and it gives students individualized study, teaching plans, and practice questions. So we are using that to get the students to the 12 hours, then using that also to give them that targeted instruction. The last stakeholder is, of course, GED.com, which we're going to look at in just a moment. This platform gives their GED ready and final test. It generates those official score reports. It allows us to schedule the GED final exams, and it connects us to study material. So I'm going to go ahead and share my other screen here. Okay, so here is an example, and I'll show you how I got here. So this is a GED manager account. So I log in, and I'm going to look up my student here. Pretty easy, first and last name. Okay, and then I'm going to click on this, and it is going to give me, so this is a fake made up student just because I didn't want to share another student's data because of FERPA, but this student took, this fictitious student took a GED math exam, and as you can see, the student scored 156, and you can see that that is in green. I'm going to click on that little graph symbol bar graph symbol right next to it, and it is going to populate this report for me. So right here, it says likely to pass, which is green. Okay, and it says, congrats, Dixon, you're ready to take the GED test. But let's say that the student did not get the score that they wanted. Let's say they got a 140. Okay, what they could do is they could go down here and link your study material. So you can see they can link it to Aztec software. They can link it to Essential Education. If you use Kaplan books at your institution, you can link it to Kaplan. There's several curriculums, online platforms, and textbook series that you can search for. But just for the sake of time, and this is a resource we have, I'm going to just go with Kaplan today. And you can see it literally tells the student exactly what pages to study in that Kaplan book, and it tells them the topic. So the instructor can say, all right, I want you to study this, but I'm also going to be teaching a whole group lesson on this, absolute value. Oh, quadratic equations, I'm going to do a small group lesson on this. Or how about locating points and graphs? Graphing linear equations. I want you to go work on that in CASAS Connects or Essential Education. And they could assign lessons to students on a virtual platform or on it in the textbook series. So there's a lot that you can do with this score report. Go back to the PowerPoint here. Sure I didn't have any questions there. In the Q&A. Thank you for bearing with me. One more thing. Lost my train of thought there. My apologies. Okay. So data results in student outcomes. So as I was saying earlier, and I just talked about too, when they take a GED practice exam, you saw that score was a 150. So it was in red, or it was in green on that main screen. That main screen that I was just showing to you, and I'll pop back over one more time. This main screen that I was showing to you, it shows that it's a GED ready math test. So with this student, we would have provided this student with a final exam voucher, and we would have also still linked it and said, hey, you did, you got a passing score, you did well, but let's continue to study to make sure that you have, you feel solid and confident going into it. But also in this same place, you are able to access students' final exam scores in this area as well. And you can't see it because it's math, but also with writing, if you were to scroll all the way to the bottom here, if a student did do a practice test with writing, the writing practice is not scored. So students need to realize that the writing is not scored on a practice test, but it is provided here at the bottom of the report. So students and instructors can look back over their writing, and it says that to review it with your instructor. For a final exam in RLA, the score is provided, but then they don't give you a copy of the student's writing sample that was on the final. So on a practice test, no score, but the writing's provided. On a final test, there is a score, but the writing sample is not provided. Okay, go back to my PowerPoint here. So 150 is eligible for a final exam. The student is ready to take the final in that particular subject area. The staff requests the final exam voucher. A study plan is still downloaded and shared with the student and the instructor to look over until the actual final happens. And then after that, they're going to move on to the next subject. Now, if a student scores, this is also an internal policy. So you know, you and your admin or you and your team can decide, but with a 145 to a 149, that student is super close. That is actually a passing score. It's just right on the cusp. So what we tell students in that regard is that the student needs to study additional time on that subject. We have the student and the instructor look at the score report, and for the next 2 weeks or so, at least 20 hours in class, we ask the student to study the content on their report, and then they can retake another practice test after the 2 weeks or the 20 hours, after they've gone over all of the things on their score report. And usually what happens is the student always grows. If they're diligent in working with what's on that score report and coming to class, and the instructor is following up with them, there's been a lot of good results. They retake it, they get the 150, we move them on to the final. Now, with a score below 144, we provide a score report. The instructor provides prescriptive and individualized instruction plans for the students, but we ask that they pay for their next practice exam if they want to do it within that semester. And if they pay and they get a 145, the standard rules apply, and we're working with them. And or if they get that 150 or higher, standard rules apply, and we are helping them cover the cost of that final exam with our donor money. Okay, so we wanted to share with you some specific outcomes that we've seen. These are actual students of ours, called student A, B, or C, just to protect privacy. But we had a student that entered our program with an NRS level of 3. They were highly motivated. They were ready to get their diploma, and they had consistent attendance. They showed up on time, stayed for all of class. So once they completed a minimum of 12 hours of coursework, they were able to take the practice test. You can see on math, which usually is a very difficult subject for students, that this particular student got 158 on the math test. And this student graduated within 5 months. And we've been in contact with the student. They stopped by and visit. And this student is actually enrolled in the college side of Indian River State College. Okay. Then we have another student that entered mid-semester. So we do have open enrollments. So this student entered mid-semester, and this student was really struggling with the RLA exam. So in the RLA content. So when this student took the practice test the first time, they got 147. So the instructor and the student received the study report, provided there was targeted instruction provided, and the student followed up studying in the classroom and at home. And after 20 hours, or those 2 weeks of class, the student retested in just 2 weeks and increased the score to 152. So this student was given a final exam voucher and was ready to move on to the next subject. And this student was able to graduate in 8 months, so shorter than 2 semesters. So we were really excited about that, right? The next student, this student was enrolled online and in person. Again, we only do hybrid options for students who had one subject area left. So evening schedule and the morning staff were unaware of the progress. So when they came in to take face-to-face classes in the morning, they were not aware of what was happening instructionally at night with the student in the online class. Okay. Or I'm sorry, vice versa. They took night classes. The morning staff that were checking data weren't aware of what was happening in the night class and online. So the new system helped because both the AM and the PM staff could see the students' voucher history, see the students' enrollment history, and say, okay, I can really see that they're struggling to pass this last exam. So both instructors, the online instructor and the face-to-face instructor, worked together. They looked at the study plan and they coordinated instruction. They talked via email. And the student retested after studying and scored a 155, which was fantastic. So a little bit more data for you that we're very excited about. We do an annual graduation for students. So every December, students who have completed their diploma all throughout the year are encouraged and invited to our graduation ceremony. So at the end of 2023, we had 49 graduates. At the end of 2024, we had 60 graduates. And then we are excited to say in 2025, 120 students graduated. This system was implemented in the spring of 2025. So from just the spring of 2025 to the end of that year, you can see that we doubled the amount of graduates within our program with the exact same enrollments. In 2026, this PowerPoint, I created it a couple weeks ago. So at the time I created this PowerPoint, Indian River State College currently has 32 students who have graduated with their high school diploma. Okay, so I'm really excited about that for sure. Okay, so, and also I wanted to share that these students, because they're showing progression, because they're taking the ready test, because they're following their study plan, because they're working their way from subject to subject, when they're showing this type of determination and this type of commitment to their studies, these students are prime candidates to be discussing IETs with. So something to think about, maybe short-term IETs because they're really progressing quickly and graduating quickly with this instructional model, but still they are prime candidates for IET programs. So maybe consider that as you're thinking about using this system. So just some key takeaways from today. This is data-driven. We're using the intake scores, the NRS levels. We're using their practice scores. And we know that these practice scores are based on the benchmarks that are going to be on the GED final exam because it's coming from GED.com. So this is the best way to gauge where your students are at academically. It's consistent across all campuses. So if a student goes from one campus to another, we serve 4 counties. If a student goes from one campus to another, everyone on our adult ed team will see this data. And also what's also consistent is the instructional model that we use. So it gives leadership real-time visibility across all 6 locations for morning, evening, and our online classes. Instructional alignment, takeaway number 3 is that instructional alignment is essential. We have to use these score reports to drive instruction, and that data is going to translate exactly to what you're going to see our teachers teaching in the classroom. They're going to look at individual score reports, but then they're going to look at all of the score reports as a whole as students start testing and say, where am I going to get the most bang for my buck? What topics are going to be the most beneficial for me to teach to move these students forward? Accountability at every step. We have the MS form, the automatic emails for our voucher system, the approval flows, making sure that, hey, this student is approved because they have the scores and the hours they need. Color-coded, the green, the yellow, the red. That also helps reduce human error because we're all human. This is an electronic system, but a lot of the data is manually entered. And I say that the results speak for themselves. The turnaround from 2023 to 2025, 145% increase is just phenomenal. So we were really excited to share this with the rest of our adult ed colleagues all across the state. I'm super glad that Brenda Diaz, Shane Moxham on the team did this. This was their baby. This was their project. I was just asked to share it out there with all of you. So hopefully your programs can benefit from the same program or from a very similar system. So. All right, so please give IPDAY your feedback. We always appreciate that honest feedback. So you should see a survey on your screen. I also want to remind you that we have another webinar Wednesday coming up on May the 20th at 3 p.m. at the same time. The title of this webinar for next week on the 20th is Expanding Horizons Beyond the Wall, Implementing IET in Local Jails. We really appreciate you all joining us today. Again, please give us that feedback. Please watch for this content to be on the website in 48 hours. And please reach out if you have any questions. We'd love to support you. And we wish you all well in your summer term.